When a rating system is used to measure performance, the person doing the rating is given a prompt explaining what they're rating and then options for providing the rating. Both parts influence the accuracy or the validity of the rating. When we think about the rating system itself, we need to ask three questions. To what extent is the characteristic being measured behaviorally? To what extent is the meaning of response categories defined? And to what degree can the person interpreting the ratings understand what response was intended by the rater? The first and third questions relate to what is rated as well as how it's rated. One approach to performance rating is to ask a question about overall performance, like, overall, how satisfied are you with this person's performance? The resulting rating isn't especially meaningful though, because the person being rated doesn't know what influenced the score. That's partially because the performance being measured is not described in terms of a behavior. Research suggests too that negative considerations will be weighed more heavily than positive in the rating. Another approach would be to use trait ratings, like asking how personable someone is. Those rating prompts tend to be broad and ambiguous though, and research suggests they're more accurate at predicting what someone will do rather than a measurement of what they did do. Given that and other considerations, those types of ratings don't tend to be defensible if the person being rated questions the use of the information. For example, if it's used to make decisions about raises. This type of rating isn't behavioral, and that makes it hard to define the response categories, which also makes it hard to interpret the ratings. Task-based ratings, in contrast, are more likely to be behavioral. They are also more legally defensible and less likely to raise justice issues, in part because they're based on the required tasks for the job. Given that it can be tricky to rate every task, though, they're grouped into categories, referred to as duties. One way to think about how the response is structured is somewhat literal. How is it formatted? The textbook provides examples of a number of what they call graphic rating scales, basically different ways of formatting the prompt and the responses. The one in this slide is the only one that provides a behavioral definition and clearly defines responses in a way that makes the meaning of the responses unambiguous. You might find it's helpful to review the other options in the figure and ask yourself, how could this be improved? The term behavioral rating is used to describe rating formats that use behaviors to determine a rating or to generate a score based on the frequency someone performs the behavior. Using this approach obviously provides a behavioral reference, either to generate a score along a continuum, like low or high, or as the focus for observing and counting the frequency of a behavior. These approaches also make the meaning of the responses clear, and the meaning of the response is similarly clear. One variation on the behaviorally anchored rating scale is to use critical incidents for the behavioral anchors. You might remember that the idea of critical incidents came up when we learned about job analysis. In that context, a critical incident is one that's essential or important to the job. In performance measurement, the term's used a little differently to explain variations that represent meaningful differences in essential tasks. Hence the idea for using them as behavioral anchors. Critical incidents could also be used in checklist format for ratings. A checklist format provides a list of behaviors, and the person rating performance select the behaviors based on the instructions. It might be the most and least representative of the behavior of the person being rated, or a certain number that are the most representative. As with many things, just because we can use something as the focus of performance measurement doesn't mean we should. While rating overall performance is quick, it's not especially informative, in part because it's not behaviorally based. Similarly, when personality-like traits are the focus, it's difficult to know how to improve. Task-based measures avoid these problems. Those task-based measures often take the form of ratings, with a specific format potentially helping emphasize the behavior and providing a clearly defined response option that allows for accurate interpretation. One approach is to use critical incidents to define the performance on the duties.